We've all heard the complaint before. Why is eating healthy so expensive? But is there actually any truth to this? Or are people just rolling out a stale old half-truth to justify poor eating habits? I want to outline why I think this idea is not only wrong, but actually very unhelpful, and why you really shouldn't buy into the lie that eating healthy is expensive. So to call the notion that eating healthily is expensive a half-truth is really to give it a little bit too much credit. It is in fact a lie that you could get away with or justify believing in if it suited you for some reason. You know, you could very easily point out that a tray of sushi or sashimi costs more than a Big Mac, or you could point out that a trendy vegetable juice costs more than a can of Coke. Sure. I could point out that an apple costs less than a piece of fried chicken, or that a serving of cashews costs less than an ice cream. Yes, different foods do cost different prices, and we end up getting nowhere. So if you have any interest in nutritional issues, and you're watching this video, so you likely do, you've probably seen memes like this, sort of proving that eating healthy is too expensive. Now, while I find most of them likely to be well-intentioned, I actually feel like they end up doing more harm than good by perpetuating this myth that you need to be wealthy to eat healthy food. Now, if you care to barely scratch the surface, you can see quite clearly that this idea is objectively and quantifiably wrong. Yet for some reason, it seems to suit some people to perpetuate the idea. You often see many journalists mindlessly parroting it to try and prove one point or another. It is sometimes quite rightly used as a measure of inequality, but most often, or more often than not, it rears its ugly head as an excuse as to why that pizza was a better option than the rice bowl with vegetables. Any objective argument that supports this idea is grounded in the idea that calorie for calorie, unhealthy foods tend to be cheaper than healthy foods. And this study is normally the one cited as evidence for this. However, I'm going to show you why the very premise that this is based on is fundamentally flawed. So for example, here we have an apple. It costs 50 pence and provides 50 calories. Here we have a donut. It costs 50 pence but provides 200 calories. Now, this would lead many people to conclude that the apple is actually 4 times as expensive as the donut because you'd need to eat 4 times as many apples to get the same number of calories as the donut. However, food isn't just about calories. It's about an entire nutrient profile. So with your donut, you get basically refined carbohydrates and fats, likely trans fats, and little else. But for your apple, you get complex carbohydrates, fiber, vitamin C, potassium, chlorogenic acid, and a host of other goodies essential for optimal health. So as you can see, this calorie for calorie position falls from the offset. The main issue we have contributing to the obesity epidemic is an overconsumption of calories and an underconsumption of nutrients. This leads many individuals into a situation where they can be overweight or obese, but actually simultaneously malnourished. This is sometimes referred to as the double burden of malnutrition. So the fact that an apple is low in calories but high in nutrient value is actually a good thing, not the proposed drawback that this argument assumes. And as this NHS article indicates, the cost per calorie measure was adopted to assess food poverty in developing nations, where rightly famine and malnutrition were the issues being considered. This metric is not at all appropriate in the majority of cases in the Western world, where calorie overconsumption is the significant factor. So we really need to be counting other nutrients. We're good for calories. Now, I realize this information might be slightly at odds with people's personal experience. I mean, I can personally recollect many times when I was in an airport or a service station and I wanted to go for a healthy food option, but the few options that were available were 4 or 5 times the price as the unhealthy options. So I do understand why there is some confusion in this regard. However, we don't need the anecdote to prove the case because we now actually have the data. So information from the Institute of Economic Affairs in the UK revealed that when measured by edible weight, healthier food in supermarkets tends to be cheaper than less healthy food. So for example, a large variety of fruits and vegetables and starchy carbohydrates and beans and legumes and things that form the base of a healthy diet are available for less than £2 per kilo. In contrast, the vast majority of foods considered unhealthy, for example, things like chocolate or crisps or bacon or ready meals, tend to cost in excess of £3 or even £4 per kilo. I think a distorted perception is strongly at play here as well. And this study from the Journal of Consumer Research revealed people will often assume expensive food products are healthier even when they are not. The high price often implying health in the perception of many consumers. Now, this particularly relates to healthy brand labels, things like gluten-free or organic or vegan. And we can all think of examples where this is obviously the case. A Snickers bar or a Mars bar with added protein, or a pizza that happens to have a gluten-free base. Things that have the exact same amount of calories, the same amount of fat, the same amount of saturated fat, the same amount of sugar, but have some healthy marketing tactic added to them in an attempt to increase the sales price. Now, this absolutely contributes to the false notion that eating healthy food is expensive. Now, at this point, people often try and level the argument that junk food is inherently more filling. Now, this one is objectively untrue and very easily falsifiable. So to go back to my favorite example of the apple and the donut, is it really to believe that the donut, full of refined carbohydrates and sugar, is really more filling than the fiber-rich complex carbohydrates contained within the apple? We know conclusively that the most satiating elements of food are fiber, whole grains, and protein, elements usually found in abundance in healthy food. The least satiating types of food, high sugar, salt, and fat foods that provide no fiber, spike your blood sugar, and leave you hungry 45 minutes later, i.e. junk foods. Now, not only does junk food not satiate you at all, it is quite literally designed to keep you hungry and wanting more. And in fact, the majority of junk foods contain foods with addictive properties in high amounts. So the idea that junk food is filling or is more filling than healthy food is just ridiculous. I want to acknowledge that I understand and recognize that there is validity in arguments relating to things like food deserts, areas that have very limited access to affordable and nutritious food. Now, the effect of living in one of these areas will likely have serious implications on the health of an individual who lives there or the population that lives there. Now, this is a very serious issue that needs to be addressed, but this is a specific and quite different argument. Now, if you work in central London and you recognize that, a Whopper from Burger King is cheaper than a salad niçoise from Pret, you are not living in a food desert. And to conflate the two arguments is a real mistake. So what do I do, you might ask? Well, I do recognize that sometimes eating healthily can be more difficult. Not necessarily more expensive, but we do live in an obesogenic environment. So sometimes to eat healthy, you need to go against the grain of what a barrage of marketing and advertising or what culture is telling you to do. So, a couple of basic tips to help you along. The obvious one is learn to cook a little bit. I'm not saying you need to, go for Master Chef or, open a restaurant or anything like that, but learn to cook a few basic, cheap and healthy meals. All the better if those meals are potentially transportable. So something you could take with you to school or university or to work or whatever. So you don't have to rely on the barrage of unhealthy options that are likely to be presented you when you leave the house. The second is to do a little bit of research. If you do work, in an office in, central Manchester, central London, whatever, look into what the common restaurants or the restaurants around you provide in terms of healthier options and go for them. You will find the majority of places really provide a range of food options. So you don't always have to go for the, chicken, bacon, cheese, double option. Most places will give you something that you can eat relatively healthy for the same price of a less healthy option. And thirdly, utilize the benefits of fasting or simply just not eating. A lot of the time we eat simply we're being told to, by that marketing and advertising I was mentioning before, not because we need to. So think of an example of, when you might be in an airport, for example, everything in there is telling you to eat, to consume. There are restaurants everywhere. You might be a bit worried that the food on the plane might not be good. If you are in a situation where you can eat, but you don't need to, opt for not eating. For the vast majority of people, in the absence of any medical conditions, skipping an unhealthy meal is better than consuming an unhealthy meal. I want to emphasize that, like with all the content I put out there, I only ever give the information to empower, never to criticize. So if you are someone who has believed this idea in the past or sort of bought into the myth that eating healthy is expensive, I'm not saying any of this to put you down, and I completely understand where the confusion comes from. But I provide this information so you can free yourself from the shackles of a relatively unhelpful myth that is likely to lead to worse health for more individuals. We are really conditioned to believe the lie that eating healthy costs more money. Yes, luxury food items like chia seed smoothies and organic salmon sashimi from Whole Foods and trendy avocado sourdough toast with feta and chili and all kinds of stuff like that. Yes, they are expensive. They're marketed as such, as luxury food items. But this is not what constitutes the base of a healthy diet, and you absolutely do not need to buy them. The items that make the bulk of a healthy diet, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean meats, low-fat dairy, eggs, are literally the cheapest in any supermarket. And don't allow people to trick you into believing otherwise. Guys, I hope this video was useful. If you liked it, please give it a like or subscribe to my channel. And I'm always willing to take requests on other videos like this one. So please, if you have any requests, put it in the comments, and the best ones I'll turn into videos just like this. Take care. Bye.